We have a magazine because of you, you know. So kind of.
I love it. I love it because I've always preferred alternative culture to mainstream. I think it's more honest. Sometimes it's more personal. It's more interesting visually, and you're helping people instead of corporations.
Exactly, exactly.
I talk about this all the time with, especially the old timers like me, but I really get a feeling analog culture is making a comeback. Digital doesn't work.
No.
Like when CDs first came out, it was like, yeah, they're going to last forever. Now we find out there's digital decay, digital rot, and CDs can go bad.
Yeah.
And you're better off buying vinyl.
Yeah, nobody saw that. And they say that digital rot, I know what you're talking about. It can happen
Yeah,
like within 10 years or less.
exactly. I've had a few die on me, and I don't even have a CD player anymore. You
Yeah.
know, they break all the time. They're so fragile. And then with magazines, you think about it. I started this magazine like 49 years ago. I still have copies. You can still read it.
Uh-huh.
How many websites have been around for 25 years?
Yep.
Digital disappears.
Yep.
It's more accessible, but it's not as permanent.
Exactly. The early years of the internet, like when everybody was like, it kind of became a household thing to have websites. One, they were never really complete in the first place. And then two, they were like, if like some of those websites are still in existence, it's like it's just scrambled. Some of the stuff doesn't read right. You can't view it
Yeah,
right. It's like it's not there anyway, you know?
yeah, it's a problem. We're doing newsprint for the first time for punk. I've
Uh-huh.
done newsprint publications before. It's always interesting working with printers. If you find a good printer, it's like finding gold. But most of them are reliable. We're promised to get magazines in time for the show on Saturday,
Mm-hmm.
and this place does high volume, but one of the last places that does web and sheet fed and a lot of different formats. So I'd love to keep working with them. But the newsprint is a whole different set of challenges than an offset. So, yeah,
So how?
but it's cheap. I wanted to do something cheap and dirty, the opposite of the Iggy magazine.
Yeah.
So the Iggy magazine was this lavishly produced on super great paper, and originally it was supposed to be like a regular issue of Punk, the same paper stock and the same everything, but it didn't work out. So anyhow,
I understand.
I could talk publishing forever. It's I was publisher of High Times. I
Yep.
published several zines. I tried to start a cannabis magazine before this, and it was the same format I did for Stop, where it's advertising driven. And by keeping it local, I got local advertisers. We're going to give away a whole bunch on Saturday. I'm hoping we run out. The first 500 I'm advertising, but we'll bring more than that because I just want people to see it.
Yeah.
It's a promotional tour, a tool.
At some point, Glenn O'Brien said that Punk Magazine was the most influential music magazine in the United States. Is that right?
Yeah, he was an editor at Andy Warhol's Interview. Then he worked at High Times. He kept this. He did a thing. What was it called? Beat. He had a column in Warhol's magazine back in the day, and I think that was a quote from an article, some mention of Punk magazine back then, and I thought it was really right on.
Yeah. I kind of.
He didn't say music magazine; he said magazine.
Just magazine in general.
The
Okay.
most important magazine for 1 year.
That sounds right. So there's been other times that you reissued newer punk magazines from its heyday. Can you tell us a little bit about those times?
I had done a test issue in 2001, but that attempt to revive the brand blew up on 9/11. I put the issue out. I checked all the numbers. The numbers looked good. Sales were good. Advertising sales, everything. So we planned a meeting. I had a little office not far from the World Trade Center, and we were supposed to have a big meeting to start pitching it on 9/11. So people don't remember this aspect of 9/11, but the economy tanked. Like, I remember the media was saying, oh, don't sell your shares, be patriotic. A lot of people dumped shares, and the stock market halved. Went from like 14 to 7,000 or something. So that killed that. And then I raised some money, and, not enough to really sustain it. I wanted to raise a lot of money, but we raised a little money and tried to put the magazine out. And then right before we go to press, Tower Records, our biggest distributor, went out of business. They went bankrupt. All the stores closed. So next I tried to put a book together for like the 40th anniversary, but it was a bit late. But that got out, and that sold pretty good. But you can see, print is slowly dying on the vine over from like the late 1990s as the internet started taking over until now.
Yeah.
So, then I did a magazine with Iggy Pop for his new album at the time, Every Loser, which I think is his best. I mean, I really wanted to do it, not only because it's Iggy, but it was Iggy at his best. This producer, his producer, Andrew Watt, who's a really great record producer and musician as well, approached me. And it was great working with him, because he's like a crazed maniac, creative genius type, I always like working with people like that, because I'm a little bit like that.
Yeah. I was hoping to ask you some questions that maybe nobody's asked before. And I was thinking, like, the bands were rock and roll bands before, and then your magazine comes out, which is called Punk Magazine, and then that's really when the kind of the genre of punk, or when artists wanted to be called punk, or because of your magazine they became punk because people viewed them as that. Is that right?
Well, to me, what happened was I was a kid. I was like 22, 23 years old when I was bringing up punk. I wasn't knowledgeable enough or eloquent enough to really communicate what was going on, what we were doing, what the other bands were doing. But the thing that happened was, in England, there were 3 weekly music newspapers: Melody Maker, New Musical Express, and Sounds. So they were always hungry for material. Here in New York, or in the States, you had a monthly like Rolling Stone that was all corporate stuff. Cream magazine was the closest thing to what we were doing, and I kind of modeled myself on the hardcore Cream readers. Circus magazine, you had all these monthlies, but they were kind of writing about bands that were already signed. So the newspapers in England were covering the music scene in New York heavily. They were all over all the bands that were playing CBGBs. So when we bring up punk, it created this demand over there for the magazine. So when we were publishing like the Ramones issue, this guy Stuart Joseph, who was running a place called Rough Trade, approached us, and they set up a deal with the publisher, Jed Dunn, who put up the money to publish punk, to air freight the magazines to London, and they were selling them to kids and charging them like $10 a copy, as I remember.
Oh my!
They had to pay for the air freight,
Yeah.
And they were selling, and they were building interest in the bands. Like Rat Scabies did a story once for Vice, the Vice Guide to Rock and Roll, and he wrote a lot about punk, and said that they would pick up a copy of Punk magazine and try to imagine what Blondie sounded like.
Yeah. So I know you get lots of calls and whatnot to be involved in punk things throughout the nation and world. What are some of the things you've been doing more recently?
I was in this punk art exhibition in LA, and it was devoted to punk art. So a lot of the West Coast illustrators who did work with the West Coast bands had their work there. And I think about it, I think Arturo and I would have been the first punk artists. He was there first.
Yeah.
I like other kinds of music too. I like punk rock the best. Best thing about the 70s, man, we had so many great punk rock bands there for a few years. The Damned, the Sex Pistols, the Clash, the Dead Boys, the Ramones, the Dictators, and so many others. And they all went on tour this summer, which is great to see.
What's new with music in the United States?
Yeah, well, I think the culture is taking a turn. I've heard that Taylor Swift, her last couple records didn't sell as well as the records before that. There's got to be some resentment over those ticket prices. But I just think people want something new. It's kind of like, yeah, we've heard this already. What's next?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And maybe punk rock will be it. Probably not. But it's always been an underground thing. It's always stood for rebellion and standing up against the mainstream and doing something different, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, and I've heard there's a lot of overseas stuff going on. Like punk overseas is pretty big on like larger regional scale.
Yeah, a lot of bands could go on tour and get a bigger audience in Europe or Japan or wherever. I mean, when Johansson reformed the Dolls, they played China. That would be wild, Mm-hmm. Actually, I know a woman who we've become friends, who published a punk zine in Ukraine before Perestroika, before the Iron Curtain came down. And the censorship and the way they were trying to suppress rock and roll and punk was incredible. And she got some amazing photos of, once everything changed, there are all these kids in Mohawks sitting on tanks rolling into Moscow. I don't know what the heck was going on over there, but, it was, may you live in interesting times. And we're certainly doing that right now.
Certainly. Yeah. The whole, just like we were talking earlier about the, just with everything online and everything and the zines and stuff being, even the comic books you were talking about earlier and it's suppressed, like not as much coming out. It's a big deal if it's only a few and such, but there's so much to that. And I think you were saying that there is kind of good. It feels like there will be a time where that kind of breaks a little bit. People get kind of tired of that too, and want something more retro, more tangible, kind of.
Yeah, to me, there's a human element to rock and roll because you got people playing instruments, and I think the original reason I dislike disco so much is that's when electronic music began replacing humans. Mm-hmm. Synthesizers it sounded like a guitar, or took over music by the early 80s. I was hearing about this. I don't like electronic music. I want that human element. I want to hear them live in the studio or live on stage. And I think with artificial intelligence threatening everybody, there's an awareness that You gotta resist the robots. You know?
There's the next big punk hit song right there, if it's not already. Or
Yeah.
maybe that's your maybe that's one of your headlines soon.
It keeps going back to those Terminator movies.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
Skynet was artificial intelligence, so we're all worried about that artificial intelligence taking over.
Yeah. Yeah, and it promises it won't.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah. It's so uncertain. It really
Hopefully we
is.
live long enough to see it.
It's so uncertain. It's so uncertain. In the meantime, we can have punk rock though, because I think what with the artificial stuff as people start to use those things, and you can see it if they use it in writing. You can see it, or you can read it. You know it's artificial. You can if you hear them doing some things in the music and stuff, you know it, or the pictures especially, like you can see it. It all starts to have a certain, it's got its own look. It's there. Oh, okay. It's just more artificial intelligence. So eventually, you're gonna be just like, when you see something real, it's really gonna stand out because you know it's freaking real.
Yeah, it's funny. Athena put out a record with someone and had an artificially intelligent image produced for the cover, and everybody hated it and rejected it, and she replaced it with a human drawing. So what you say is true. I think people at this point, they're saying artificial intelligence is going to be able to outdo humans and all this, but I don't think, like I'm not impressed by perfection. I don't use Illustrator to fix my drawings and make them look perfect. I like them to look a little ragged and imperfect. Like one of the proudest quotes I've ever heard about my work, the famous fashion designer Marc Jacobs said once, "If I ever designed a tuxedo, I'd want it to be in John Holmstrom style and kind of imperfect and, rough around the edges." It's not an exact quote, but, it's along those lines, and that's true. Like, my work is not perfect. It's obviously made by a human. So I think it makes it more relatable.
Yeah, yeah. There's something about that that when you see that I don't know what it is, but yeah, you can relate to it on a different place. And like you said, like the when I see the AI stuff, I didn't think about that till you said that, the word reject it. I do kind of. I'm just like, oh, that's not real. You just turn off because you know it's not real. So it's like,
Yeah.
you're automatically. But when you see something that's like, has been created by somebody, you're just drawn into it because it stands out and it's authentic and it has those little imperfections that really are like, ooh, did they do that on purpose? Was that an accident? You start to think about it. Just makes your brain do a different thing, I think.
Yeah, even really crummy, crappy art can look more interesting than something perfect. It's obviously manufactured. So let's be human and have fun. Exactly. Artificial intelligence can't have fun. That's what makes us people.
Yeah, it pretends to have fun.
Yes.
Or it will pretend, I think. I don't know.
Punk is fun. That's my message. Punk is fun.
I like that. Punk is fun. So take me back to the glory years of Punk magazine, and you were writing about these artists that weren't famous yet.
We wrote about the Ramones before their first record came out. We wrote about everybody before the first record came out. So it was kind of weird because by the time we were going out of business in '79, we always had a problem with sales. The magazine wasn't on many newsstands. We didn't have many record stores to sell it. Sales were poor. We had tons of back issues stacked up and never sold. Then in '79, it started selling like hotcakes. But at that time, once the Sex Pistols broke up, people were like, "Oh, you're going to change the name of your magazine now, right? You're going to change it to New Wave or whatever." I was like, screw that. We're forever punk. And so I went down with the ship.
Yeah. understand that. So yeah, that I mean, I've heard the story before, but it's great to hear it from your mouth. You know, your full deal there. But that's basically the way I've heard it. So it's they must have got it right. So now then you've we were talking earlier and I about you did some you were going to bring it back a couple times. You had some different things going on, and with the Iggy Pop thing. So I guess you produced the Iggy Pop album as well with that magazine. Is that what was going
Well,
on with that?
the CD was pasted inside. They decided at first they wanted to publish it as a regular issue and put it polybag it with all of the CDs to do CD sales, because the whole Andrew Watt's original vision was we bring out an issue of punk and we polybag it with the CD and package it with an album, and it's going to boost the sales. But I had so much trouble getting the material from the record company. Like, the weirdest thing was, I get this long interview with Flea and Iggy. It's like 13 pages long in the magazine. And it could have filled up 24. It was so long. And they delivered it on the deadline day, on the day the magazine was supposed to be going to the printer.
Oh, wow.
So we're scrambling, and then I'm like, where are the photos of the musicians? Like in the old days, you'd get a media kit, right? You'd get this little folder, and you get a press release and some notes and photos of everybody on the album. Well, they were scrambling to get stock photos of the musicians and try to communicate with them to give approval to use a photo of theirs. So that took another week or two. I had given them a name of a printer I think could have handled printing a magazine and polybagging it in time for distribution. But I don't think they wanted to use their usual vendors. So they decided to do a super deluxe edition, charge a lot of money, and package it with just like 2,000 CDs, like limited edition.
Yeah.
But then they put it up, and they call us a zine. You know, Iggy CD with a zine instead of punk magazine. And I talked to them, but they didn't get around to changing it. So you can still buy it. But they made money.
Yeah.
You know, they already made a lot of money on it because it cost so much to buy. And the printing's wonderful, but nowadays a lot of printers are doing 1,000 or 2,000 copies. And back in the old days, you know, like when I was in the High Times, we were printing like 300,000, and we're still kind of a small magazine.
Yeah.
I attended a few comic book conventions, and back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, the comic book would have to sell 100,000 copies minimum, or else it would be, you know, cut. Nowadays, I've heard even the best-selling titles have trouble selling 30,000, like a Spider-Man, and they're probably even lower now. Like, comic book shops are closing. It's kind of an oversaturated market. One good thing about doing small press, I mean, there are reasons why all these fanzines, all these punk zines from the 70s sell for outrageous prices. It's supply and demand.
Yeah.
Even these books, like Richard Lloyd's book or Cheetah Chrome's book, I heard, you know, they sold whatever number the original publisher wanted to sell, and then it goes out of print. And this happened with my book, too, The Best of Punk. You know, we published 10 years ago, and then the publisher decided not to reprint it, and now it sells for $100, at least, if you're lucky. So my advice to you or anybody else doing a zine, publish an extra 50 and sock them away. Wait 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
well, for the 40th anniversary, we managed to reprint Punk #1 on a decent paper stock.
I saw that reprint. In fact, I was looking at maybe trying to get a copy of that. That's
Yeah, I sell them on eBay for like $30 signed.